In today's weekly news video, we're going to touch on another prime example of Panini's terrible quality control. I'm going to touch on some comments from Sasha T regarding how you should be buying and selling your high-end cards. And then also we'll touch on some terrible news out of HGA with their former CEO, Tyler, being sued. Pretty nasty things in that one, so we'll get to that at the very end. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I want to touch on is Panini's terrible quality control. I've spoken about this many times on the channel in the past. I'll quickly show you this video. This person bought a box of 2021 Contenders Optic football, $675 box, and as you can see, it opens a wrapper, opens a box, it's empty. There's no packs in there. Now, some of you might say, well, how do we know that this person didn't unseal the box, remove the packs, and then do this purely for the camera? We don't know. I'm not sure how reputable this breaker is. I'm not going to make those kind of comments, but I have seen this happen in the past for a fact with people that I trust wholeheartedly, right? I trust these people 100%. I've seen mistakes like this happen with Panini back in like 2013, 14 when I was heavy into basketball collecting. In particular, it was 2013 Select Basketball. This sort of stuff was not too uncommon, okay? So this is really concerning, especially these days when Panini's charging the kind of money they're charging and they're still making these kind of errors. Like, that's completely unacceptable. This person's paid, obviously not direct from Panini, but $675 for this box. And if he didn't film it, he would have been very screwed over right now because he wouldn't have seen, he would have no claim to make, right? And this is why I touched on in my last video where I spoke about, things or ways you can prevent being scammed as a buyer. The main thing and the most important thing you should be doing is filming every single opening, whether it's a mail day, box break, anything, film it. Because when something like this happens, you're shit out of luck if it's not caught on camera, because there's no way Panini would believe you. There's no way the retailer you bought this from would believe you, right? So it's just shocking. This is an $800 Australian box of cards. I'd be fuming. I'd be furious if I opened it and there was nothing in there, okay? And I didn't film it. You'd be so livid because that's all that money down the drain. Your money would have gone down the drain by opening this pack anyway because you probably wouldn't have hit shit. But you get the idea, right? It's absolutely shocking that Panini can still make these kinds of errors when they're charging the amount of money they're charging to wholesalers and to distributors. It's just absolutely shocking. And it doesn't stop with just boxes of cards being empty or packs not containing the hits they should be containing. You also get things like this where you've got flawless, right? You've got Trevor Lawrence patch auto, RPA out of 25, sealed in the obviously flawless slab, and look at the damage on the card. Okay, what are they doing from a QC perspective? They're not checking that boxes contain packs, but then also they're not checking on a very high-end product that the card is not damaged, and they're not checking it when the card was first printed, when the auto was placed on. They're not checking it when it was put in the slab. They're not checking when it was sealed. Not checking when it was put in the pack. Like, what the heck is going on out of Panini, right? And I've touched on this many times, so the regulars will know that one of the things I found most shocking, like since I got back into the hobby, like I've always been in the hobby, right? But since I got back heavy into the hobby over the last 3 to 4 years, is that Panini are still making these kinds of mistakes when they're charging the kind of money that they are. And like them, along with the graders, have sort of, uplifted their process, or shouldn't say uplifted their process. They've taken the value up here and they haven't uplifted their process. They've kept their risk appetite all the way down here, which is maybe what it was when they were charging the former values they were charging us with the turnaround times they were previously charging us, right? The hit rates they were previously charging us for. They know they're like, okay, we want more money. We want to maximize as much money as possible. And they're keeping their risk appetite down here. So you're seeing these kinds of errors. And some of you might say, well, they're printing maybe 10 times more cards than they were 5 years ago. So you expect the kind of error to happen. So it makes sense, which is, true to an extent, right? As you're printing more cards, you do assume you're going to print or have more errors purely based on volume, right? But their QC should be getting uplifted alongside this sort of stuff, alongside their increased printing, to mitigate against an increase in those errors, right? So what I'm saying is, yes, you might expect to see some sort of error rate with the printing, but you don't expect to see the error rate to grow in proportion to the card you're printing, right? And that's essentially what's happening. So previously, if they, were printing 1 million cards and they made 1,000 errors on those 1 million cards, you'd expect them when they go to 5 million cards to then make 5,000 errors. But what I think is happening in this instance, because it's times by 5, they're maybe printing 5 million cards, but they're making, 30, 40,000 errors, right? So it's growing exponentially from where it was before, which is why it's unacceptable. And this is not just limited to these guys that are printing the cards. Like I've said before, the same stuff happens out at PSA with their grading, right? Where it's so inconsistent. It happens out of BGS. It happens out of SGC. Like, this stuff is just ridiculous. And it's just, cowboys everywhere. Wild West. This stuff is not good enough for the amount of money that's currently in the hobby. Now, the next thing I want to touch on is Sasha T and some comments he made. I think it's like the Whatnot podcast or something along those lines with this guy, Siblos. I don't know much about him, but they were talking about how when you're selling a high-end card, your first offer is always the best offer and you should take it, okay? And I feel like they got confused when they were talking about this, because when they were talking about the first offer being the best offer, they were then talking about you don't know when the next offer is going to come and you're trying to be too greedy, so you need to take the money that you can, right? I think those are two different points, right? Because, I've sold a lot enough on eBay, and maybe not super high-end cards, but I've been to enough shows and things like that where I've seen these kind of cards sell. I've spoken with people that sell these kind of cards, and they'll often tell you, the first offer that someone puts out, and I do this all the time when I'm buying things, is not my best offer. I put a feeler out there first, right? Because if something's listed for 75 grand, I'm not going to go there and go, okay, well, I can only afford to pay 50 grand for this card, so I'm going to offer 50 up front. And then he'll come back and say, well, I'll give it to you for 60. So then you end up being at 55. You're overstretching, right? So you end up spending a little bit more than you wanted to. It's like, no, I'd come in at, 30. And then he'd say, like, no, that's too low, like at least 60. And then I'd say, well, no, maybe 45, 50. And then you'd work up to your point, right? So that's why it's a bit strange. It's almost like not the best business practice to go with your best offer up front, right? And that might speak to some, and I'm not saying Sasha T does this, but that might speak to why some of these, young guys coming into the hobby from the sneaker flipping industry and Supreme and all that sort of stuff, that are maybe now going to experience some issues because they've come out up front and started giving their best offers perhaps, which means that when the market has a downturn, they've overpaid for everything. Right. And obviously everyone's going to be impacted by a market downturn or the hobby downturn, but you get what I'm trying to say. And the second point being, not being too greedy and you don't know when the next offer is going to come. That's a different point, right? Because you got to be sensible when you're negotiating offers. Obviously, if the price you put up to the offer you get is reasonable, then take the offer. Okay. But if you put up a crazy price or you've put up a reasonable price and somebody's come in and lowballed you and you don't need to take the offer, don't take the offer. You might not get one for a while, but you may not need to take the offer, right? It's just, I don't know. Please let me know your thoughts on that, because I think it's a bit strange. I feel like they're two different points. I'm keen to get your thoughts on that as well. Like, I get the idea behind it, but I think it's very different, right? Like, it's very different to not being greedy and making sure you take the offer, right? Because you never go broke taking a profit, which is correct. So it's all about managing your risk appetite, getting to that point where you're comfortable to take that offer, I think is what's most important. I don't think it's necessarily super true that your first offer is always the best. So I know I rambled a little bit there, but please share your thoughts down on that in the comments below. The last point I want to touch on is some news out of HGA with Tyler Hitt, the former CEO, being sued. Now, the reason why he's being sued by a former employee is pretty disgusting, to be honest. It's based off some racist and derogatory alleged comments by him. I'm not sure, like, it's hard to, outside looking at it, it's hard to comment on whether this is accurate or not, or whether the person's just trying to do a cash grab or something along those lines, but it's sort of like a watch this space. So I'll tag Sports Card Radio down below. I'll put the link down to their video, so please check that out. You can watch that. I'm not going to go into the detail beyond that. I just thought I'd flag that to you. When we do hear some more news, I will flag it. I know he's not associated with HGA anymore, but this occurred during his time while he was CEO, so I think it is relevant to the hobby news. When I do hear more, I'll raise it. It's really disappointing to me that if it is true, and it's very alleged at this stage, right? I don't want to get into any trouble, and I don't want to paint Tyler in a bad way if it's inaccurate what basically this person is suing for. But it's just really disappointing. There's people out there these days that can still be this kind of racist and basically be bigots towards, minority communities. It's very disappointing. If it is true, I hope they throw the book at him. But at this stage, it's very, very much alleged. So take the words that I've said with a grain of salt. Watch the Sports Card Radio video and wait to see if more news comes out. Because, like I said, it's alleged at this stage. We'll see what happens, or alleged, I should say. So that's sort of it. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on any of the points we've discussed, what your thoughts are around Panini's quality control, if you've experienced anything like that yourself. But I think it's, it's not surprising. I've seen it enough now that it's pretty crazy. Their quality control, their risk appetite is absolutely terrible right now. It's unacceptable, and I'm not sure if it's going to get fixed when Fanatics come in, to be honest. And I think Panini's just going to, print shit to death and do away with their QC because they don't care. They've lost their license, so it is what it is. I'm also keen to get your thoughts on the Sasha T conversation regarding whether the best offer is your best. Like I said, please share those down in the comments below, and then also on the Sports Card Radio video regarding HGA. So please share those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.